My coverage of Computex 2018 is brought to you by Gigabyte, Cooler Master, Team Group, and Thermaltake. My next up on my Computex tour is Thermaltake, and they have a ton of stuff on display. They always have some epic systems, and I'm actually going to do a builds of Computex video later in my coverage, so come back for that because I will be showing some close-ups of those. But let's talk specifically about products that Thermaltake is showcasing, and they actually have a few new cases. First off, the Thermaltake A500. Now, I thought this case had a pretty sexy and striking design. It's got an aluminum top and front, as well as vented strips that you can see along the top and front edges, and they're kind of tucked into that tempered glass that you get for both side panels. It has a steel frame internally, and then the tempered glass side panels can swing open for access to the interior of the case. There's a vertical GPU mount as well, so you can set your GPU there to put it on display for everyone to see, and it's got a modular storage rack, so it has little drive cages that you can position up or down on that rack. 2 cages are included, so nice to have a little bit of modularity there. I have seen designs like this in the past, but Thermaltake has decided to add it to theirs as well. There's a dust filter on the bottom of the case. That should be a requirement. And for I/O, you've got 2 USB 3 and 2 USB 2 on the I/O. This is a more silent optimized case, which is why they've kind of tucked the ventilation along to the sides there. But for radiator support, the front and the top both support 360 rads or 280 rads, so 3x120 or 2x140. We're expecting this to launch at the end of Q3, and they've told me the estimated MSRP is $229. Next up, we have several cases that are all labeled level 20. Now, the level 20 is the successor to the level 10 case that they came out with like 10 years ago. That was actually one of the earliest like super high-end premium cases from Thermaltake that I ever worked with individually compartmentalized spaces for all the different components. Level 20, they showed off last year at Computex, and it was an extremely high-end case, and it sort of took a lot of the designs from the original and sort of brought it up to modern standards. So now they have 3 new versions of the level 20s. These are all expected to launch late in Q3, and the pricing I'm going to tell you guys is tentative for now, but I do have at least ballpark pricing. Let's go from small to big, starting with the level 20 VT, which is a Micro-ATX enclosure. It's going to cost $99 estimated, and it's going to come with a 200mm front intake fan. Now, what they have set up for the display here is showing lots of RGB and stuff. The fan it will ship with will not have RGB, but it does have 4 tempered glass panels on both sides, front and top. Now, the entire rear panel as well as motherboard tray can all be rotated together, so that gives you 3 potential configurations. You can have it horizontal, or you can twist it so the motherboard's on one side, or flip it around so the motherboard is on the other side. That's a nice bit of flexibility there. I also like that this is a Micro-ATX case because you don't tend to see a lot of love for Micro-ATX, but good to have options here. It is on the larger side for Micro-ATX, but it's made to fit a full water cooling setup. Next up is the level 20 XT, a bit of a step up from the level 20 VT, sort of a taller, still box-like design. This one's going to cost $199 estimated, and it will come with one 140mm standard fan. They didn't include a lot of fans with these models because they're assuming that you're going to want to choose your own fans to install there, whether you want Thermaltake RGB ones or otherwise. This case also has a tempered glass top, front, and sides, and it's got a dual PSU mount at the bottom, so it supports eATX motherboards, and there's just tons of space inside that you can see here. So I imagine for modders or anyone who might want to figure out how to fit 2 systems in there probably is a way to do that. The motherboard tray sits on a couple rails, and that can actually be shifted forward or back, or just expanded upon again for that eATX support. And you can fit some pretty huge radiators in here. Dual 480mm rads can be fit at the bottom of the case or up at the top of the case, and of course that's very ideal for water cooling. The I/O is pretty nice here as well. You get 2 USB 2.0, 2 USB 3.0, as well as a Type-C. Let's move on to the level 20 GT RGB. This one's going to cost mid $200 range. They weren't quite as specific with their estimated cost for this one, but this one is pretty cool because you can take the entire PCI Express tray, all the expansion slots, and you can rotate that. So that'll allow you to do standard mounting for graphics cards, or by rotating that whole thing, you can do vertical GPU mounts for SLI, which is a bit more rare than just those single 2 or 3 slot vertical GPU mounts. This one has locking tempered glass swing doors on both sides for easy access into the case, and they wanted to point out that the tempered glass panels are actually spaced out away from the case, so even though air can't blow through tempered glass, around the edges there's a decent sized gap, so you can still get some airflow. The I/O on this one is actually split between the 2 top front sides of the case, but it does include 2 USB 2, 2 USB 3, as well as that Type-C 3.1 port. This case does support up to 4 200mm fans, and since it's a little bit more on the expensive side, they did ship it with fans included, so you get 2 200mm Ring Plus RGB fans for the front, or you can reposition them, and then one 140mm Ring Plus RGB as well. Also, if I didn't mention, these systems have like badass water-cooled systems installed in there, so a good example of how you might kit out one of these cases if you happen to buy one. Now, Thermaltake has received a lot of praise for their RGB LED ecosystem, and indeed it is pretty expansive with lots of different effects, and they have control boxes that you can use to expand it out. So for example, not just having all the LEDs in your case, but they like to make an entire wall full of their RGB LED fans to demonstrate just how many can be connected and controlled all at the same time. It's called Thermaltake RGB Plus, and they've added Thermaltake AI voice control to it now, which basically means you can use an app, just tell it what effect you want it to do, and it will load up that effect for you. I don't know if that is artificial intelligence, strictly speaking, but voice control is nice for RGB LEDs. They also have a couple new RGB LED fan designs. So to go along with their original Thermaltake Ring RGB LED fans, which have again received lots of praise, they now have the Ring Duo and the Ring Trio. The Duo has a pretty similar frame design to the original Ring fans, but they've added a second set of addressable RGB LEDs to the hub of the fan, and they're also updating the fan blades and the housing around the side with sort of a frosty, semi-opaque finish, and that will allow the lights to shine through while being diffused enough so you get a nice bit of soft diffusion. The Ring Trio, I think RGB fanatics will be very interested in because it has 3 sets of RGB LEDs, as Trio might imply. It also has a new single-piece frame that goes around the edge, so that allows both RGB rings around the ringed outside to shine through. And it's a separate set of LEDs on either side of the fan, as well as that third set of LEDs in the fan hub. Altogether though, this makes for a pretty impressive set of RGB components that can all be integrated together, and they had sort of the ideal RGB LED fanatics desk setup going on there. Thermaltake was doing some demonstrations there. They had the desk, the computer, all of the peripherals connected, as well as all the fans up on the wall. I particularly like some of the two-tone RGB themes that they have set up with this, like they had a white and yellow theme that I thought that was pretty cool. But the software, of course, is also being developed over time. I'm not going to dive into that right now, but you can easily go in there to select the different components, set up the themes, change the colors, and make it all go and be pretty. But guys, that's all the time I have for this video of the Thermaltake booth at Computex 2018. I'd like to say a huge thank you to my sponsors, Thermaltake, of course, as well as Gigabytes, Team Group, and Cooler Master. I have more Computex videos coming down the pipeline, so don't forget to subscribe, hit the thumbs up button, and we'll see you guys in the next video.